Today we're graphing inverse trig functions with transformations. So this is the inverse. I like to start with the picture. Okay, the inverse we know goes from -1 to 1. What this does is shift it up. It's usually goes like this. We don't want that though. Okay, so we're going to take that and shift it up a half, and so it's going to go like this. Okay, so that the shifts are the same. That's the vertical shift up and down. So my domain is still -1 to 1. My range now goes from 0 to pi. Okay, we're going to work down the page first because they want me to find the inverse of the inverse. So you're going back to the function. When I switch my x and y's, you end up with x equals pi over 2 plus the inverse sine of y. The first thing you do is you're going to subtract that pi over 2 from both sides, and then you're going to take the sine of both sides, because the sine of the inverse sine, not seeing, I gotta get rid of that. The sine of the inverse sine, they cancel each other out like squaring a square root, okay? So now I have a horizontal shift on my sine function. My sine function was down here. We're shifting it right pi over 2, so my new one comes over here. And sure enough, its range is -1 to 1, and its domain is 0 to pi. They're the opposite of these. Okay. It's good to know. Not hard. We're not going to do very complicated transformations. All right, this is the irregular sine function. It's not the inverse. So that started down here, right? What's the +2 do? It moves it up. So I'm going to move up pi over 2. I mean up 2. This was at -1, so now it's up here at 1. And my graph's going to go like this. And this is 1, and this is 3. So my range is 1 to 3. My domain is -pi over 2 to pi over 2. If I take that, come down here, -pi over 2 to pi over 2, and this is 1 to 3, it helps me draw the picture. All right, let's do the math. You end up with x equals 2 plus the sine of y. You subtract the 2, so x minus 2. And then you take the inverse sine of it. And you now have a graph that's shifted left and right. Right? The usual down here, it went from -1 to 1. We're going to move right 2, so it's over here, which is what it tells us. And it goes like this. And it's still between -pi over 2 and pi over 2. Yeah, make sure you label your graphs as 1 and -1. All right, like here, label these pi over 2, -pi over 2. This is 1. This should have been pi up here. Okay, make sure you label. There's a squiggle on the graph without any labels. I'm not going to give you any credit for it. Not bad. All right, this is the cosine graph. It starts like this. We're going to shift it. Oh, it's the inverse graph. Sorry, that was wrong. Let's just start over. The inverse cosine graph goes like this. And it tells me it's going to go right 2, because this is -1 to 1. If it moves over 2, it's over here at 3. And I didn't change my range. Okay, so this is still 0 to pi. And this is +1 to 3. you're going to switch your x and y's, and the first thing you do is you end up with the cosine of x, and then you're going to add 2. You'll notice a horizontal shift on this is a vertical on the inverse. So my cosine graph normally went from here to here. We're going to shift it up to, that's a bad graph. Hang on, let me do that again. Bloop, bloop. Here's 3, and it goes down like that. And here's 1, and this is pi. Okay, so my range is 1 to 3, and my domain is 0 to pi. This time we start with the parent function, and it's going to go right pi over 2, so it's going to go from here to here. So this is 3 pi over 2, pi over 2, negative 1 and 1. My range is negative 1 to 1. My domain is pi over 2 to 3 pi over 2. When I find the inverse of that, these flip-flop. How do I do this? The first thing you're going to do is take the inverse cosine of x, and then you add pi over 2. Okay, this was a horizontal shift. When you take the inverse, it's a vertical shift. So it's starting here and going like this. It's still negative 1 to 1, pi over 2 to 3 pi over 2. Okay, let's do some tangent ones. Same thing. Let's graph that. This is the inverse tan, so they go long ways. The moves it up, so my asymptotes are now here. The negative 3 moves it right 3, so this is 3, and my graph is going like this. So my range is 0 to pi, and my domain is all reals. You flip-flop them down here. And the horizontal here is vertical. All right. And the vertical here is horizontal, so I'm shifting it right pi over 2. So now you're at pi. And that's going to go up 3. Because what do? You switch your x and y's, and then you're going to subtract pi over 2. And then you take the inverse of the inverse, and then you're going to add 3. Okay, so this is 3, this is pi, this is pi. Okay. This time we start with the parent function. That moves it left pi, so instead of being here, we're over here. Negative pi over 2 and negative 3 pi over 2. Your range is all reals. The down 4 moved it down to here. And your domain is negative 3 pi over 2 to negative pi over 2. They switch down here. And what do? First you switch your x and y's and you add 4, so you end up with x plus 4. You take the inverse of the function, and then you subtract pi. So I'm now going to do a vertical shift of pi. So my asymptotes drop down to here. And I'm moving left 4. And my graph goes like this. And that's all there is to it. Have fun with the homework.